Welcome to Keep Heading East. In this episode we're going to be looking at French cuisine as a whole, how it's evolved and the huge influence that it's had on global cuisine. I'm Murray from the YC Cookery School. If you're joining us again, then welcome back. If you're joining this series for the first time, you've joined us in France, which is the fourth stop on our tour of global feasting. You can have a look at the main introduction to this series by clicking the on-screen link below. And there's a link in the description for our free PDF cookbook with all of the dishes that we're cooking in our own kitchen for this series. Or if you prefer, there's a link there for a printed version as well. Now, historically, the earliest French recipe collection dates back to the 14th century, when the style of cooking in France was heavily influenced by the surrounding countries, by its neighbours. It wasn't until the 17th century when a couple of chefs started to shift French cuisine away from its neighbouring influences, and France began to develop an indigenous style of its own. Cheese and wine are really important aspects of French cuisine, and these two ingredients play a very heavy role in identifying regional dishes and styles right across this very large and diverse country. In the 20th century, a chef called Auguste Escoffier formalised French cuisine and created what's now known as haute cuisine, a very upmarket style of cooking and eating for the elite, and that manifests itself in high-end hotels and restaurants. Many consider this to be the birthplace of the modern kitchen. However, this style neglected a lot of regional character, and due to the high labour content of delivering this style of food, it was quite unattainable for the domestic kitchen. Now, haute cuisine's laborious preparation methods and kitchen practices still form the basis of most formal Western cookery training and culinary institutions around the globe, with students working their way through all of the French classics, from roux and butter sauces to ballantines and poached whole salmon with all the fiddly vegetable decorations on the top and so forth. While larger formal kitchens such as hotels, the cruise boats and fine dining restaurants are able to sort of charge enough money or offset the high staffing costs with other offerings like accommodation and entertainment, most smaller operations or less formal restaurants still adhere to a similar structure. It's just thinned down a little bit. For example, a larger hotel brigade would have a chef de cuisine or a head chef right at the top, who's mostly occupied with planning, paperwork and menu planning and things. He'd be running the pass, which is the transition between the kitchen and the wait staff, where the food's all laid out, finished and checked before it gets sent to the restaurant. It's the sous chef or the second chef who's in charge on the ground, in the kitchen, making sure that all the sections of the kitchen are heading in the right direction. The actual work is done by each section. It's split up. Now, each section has a chef de partie who's in charge of the section. And in a large kitchen brigade, those sections would include a saucier for the stocks and sauces and sautéing, a poissonnier for cooking the fish, the entremetier is the guy who does all the veg prep, the rôtisseur is for roasting meat, grillon is for all of the grilled food, the fruitier does the fried food, the garde-manger does the cold preparations and salads, the pâtissier or the pastry chef does all the desserts and pastries, a boulanger for the baking, a boucher or the butcher for the primal sort of meat preparation. And each of these sections would then have a second in charge who's the demi-chef de partie. Depending on the size of the section and the size of the operation, there'd be a number of commis chefs as well. And they do all the crappy jobs. Not to forget the most important person in the kitchen, or people in the kitchen, the plongeur, who's the kitchen porter or the dishwasher in English. Okay, so it's really easy to see with all of those sections how a kitchen brigade can quickly become 30 or 40 people. And in some fine dining establishments, that may be just to feed 50 diners. So it's quite elaborate. Now, in the late 60s, there was another big shift in French cuisine known as Nouvelle Cuisine, or the new cuisine, which ironically, this term's been used a few times in history. And it was even used in the 1890s to describe Escoffier's haute cuisine. But anyway, this Nouvelle Cuisine was a healthier, lighter, simplified style of cooking that made recipes more attainable for the home cook and easier for chefs. Nouvelle Cuisine was a lot less heavy and rich than Haute Cuisine. It used a lot less cream and flour in the sauces and a lot less butter, more olive oil. And it focused on fresh, vibrant ingredients with an emphasis on beautiful presentation and really highlighting the ingredients on the plate instead of drowning them and masking them in heavy sauces. It also saw a big shift back to highlighting regional ingredients, and it was quite an exciting time for dining out in France. The other effect that Nouvelle Cuisine had was on the restaurant kitchen. It meant that things could be simplified and run more cost effectively. A brasserie or a gastropub style of operation could condense this traditional kitchen framework down and use a lot less chefs. Now, there could be hundreds of ways to set up a kitchen depending on what the needs were, what style of restaurant was, but generally you'd probably have a setup where the head chef was also the grill chef and the roast chef and the sauce, so he's doing all of the cooked meat and sauce. The sous chef probably is running a section as well, and maybe he's doing the fish. And the veg guy would also be doing all the fried foods and hot starters and things like that. And the pastry chef and the cold section, the salads and cold starter section, would probably be run by one guy as well. And the KP would be there to do everything else. There's a lot more crossover between the sections depending on the physical layout of the kitchen and of the restaurant. Most of the restaurants that I've run use this kind of setup. And with a small team of 4 or 5 chefs, you're able to knock out a couple of hundred covers a night. Now, although that's quite a lot of work and you're always busy in a kitchen, it's strangely the same amount of workload for a chef working in a formal restaurant that might have 20 chefs serving 45 diners. Now, there's been some amazing chefs and dishes to come out to France over the years, and this week I wanted to touch on a couple of French classics. Raymond Blanc is a French chef who spent most of his career working in Oxfordshire in the UK, and in 1983 opened the infamous Manoir aux Quatre Saisons, a wonderful manor house in the Oxfordshire countryside with huge gardens that provide for the restaurant. Now, the restaurant itself has 2 Michelin stars to its name, and it's also trained 34 Michelin star chefs in its time. Some of the best known British chefs like Marco Pierre-White, Heston Blumenthal, Michael Caines, John Burton Race, and many, many more. If you ever get the chance to eat there, it's a great example of a chef who's able to make really formal food, but keep everything light. So the video link in the end cards will take you to Raymond's traditional French classic, the beef bourguignon. As with a lot of dishes from the Burgundy region, this rich stew features bacon or pancetta, mushrooms, and red wine. These are quite classic staples in French cuisine. Now, one of my other favourite dishes that's available in brasseries all over France is Moules Marinier. Although technically the dish originated in Belgium, it's commonly known as a French classic. It's a simple dish and it makes a great summertime lunch. So there's a link to a great clip by Bruno Albouze, a French chef living in the US. He's an experienced chef and his channel features some really, really great videos and recipes from the French classics. So check him out as well. As for our recipe in the Keep Heading East cookbook this week, we're making white chocolate and pistachio macaroons. They require a little bit of practice, but I promise you they're worth the effort. So that's it for this stop on our Keep Heading East tour of global cuisine. I hope you've enjoyed it. Links are on screen now for the videos I mentioned earlier if you'd like to see a little more from the region. And remember, for our subscribers, there's a fantastic cookbook to accompany this series. So if you haven't already, hit subscribe and grab yourself a free PDF copy of our cookbook, or if you prefer a hard copy, the links are there as well. Thanks for watching. See you soon.